Hello, my name is Lisbeth Rodriguez, and my presentation that I will be presenting today is about bilingualism. So, at first, I had chosen to do a presentation about culture and how cultural can influence how our mind works, like how we think or how we behave. But I changed my topic because one day I was sitting with one of my friends working on homework, and I had mentioned to her that when I work on my Spanish assignments, it I get them done very quick compared to if I were to get an English assignment done, it would take me twice as long. And I asked her if that happened to her because she is bilingual as well. She also speaks Spanish and English. And she said that happens to her as well. And so I was curious, if there were other people who were bilingual who had this experience. And when I asked some of my other classmates or friends if that happened to them, they agreed that that does sometimes happen to them. They take twice as long to do their work in English than in Spanish. And that's when I started to think, like, why does that happen? Or I just started to get more interested in the topic of bilingualism, so I did some research on that. And so, bilingualism refers to the ability to use two languages in everyday life. Contact between two languages is typical in regions of many countries. Some of these countries include Europe, Asia, Africa, North America, just to name a few there. Some data and information that I found was that in the United States, a large and growing number of bilinguals live in California, Texas, Florida, New York, Arizona, and New Mexico. It is predicted by researchers that in California, by 2035, it is expected that over 50% of children who are enrolled in kindergarten will have grown up speaking a language other than English. Bilinguals who learn two languages from birth are referred to as simultaneous bilinguals, and those who learn a first language aloud, followed by a second language, whether that is as a toddler or as an adult, are referred to as sequential bilinguals. So an example would be myself. I am considered a sequential bilingual because I learned Spanish, which is my first language, at birth, like from birth, and then I didn't learn my second language, which is English, until I was 5 years old, doing kindergarten. Bilingual exposure does not guarantee to being a bilingual who is able to understand and speak a language fluently. So just because you are bilingual or you're considered bilingual does not mean that that person fluently can speak and read both Spanish and English. I know people who consider themselves bilingual, but maybe they can't, read Spanish. They can only read and speak English and only speak Spanish and not be able to read English. So just because you're bilingual does not mean that you're fluent in both languages. And here's a quote that I found that I really liked. Being bilingual benefits children as they learn to speak and adults as they age. So most of my presentation is going to talk about the benefits of bilingualism towards children and adults that researchers have found. A lot of people ask these questions. A lot of people like to take into consideration these questions before they teach their children a second language. Some of these questions include, are bilingual children confused if they do learn two separate languages? Does bilingualism make children smarter? Should parents speak only one language with a bilingual child? Should mixing languages together be avoided? Is early better? Are they more likely to have language difficulties, delays, or disorder. So these are some of the questions I'll be answering through the research that I have found. Researchers have found that it is clear that infants do not show any evidence of confusion. Actually, infants are smart enough to flip back and forth. Their brains can flip back and forth and understand both English and Spanish. Researchers have found that this is due to code mixing. So, fluently bilingual adults can speak whatever language they choose in the moment, and they are clearly not confused. And this is also true with bilingual children. When bilingual children mix words from two languages in the same sentence, that is known as mixed coding. Code mixing on bilingual children's development is still quite limited, so there isn't quite as much research out there as I would like there to be. But the research that is out there is very clear. Most children do code mix because that is what they hear from adults. So if you speak to your child by mixing words in two languages, they're gonna learn that behavior. The bilingual children, they're just learning what they're being taught. So if you talk to your child mixing words, they're gonna most likely learn how to code mix as well and talk in that way. Another reason some children code mix is that is what happens frequently in their language communities. I know growing up I didn't code mix at a very young age, just because at home my parents only spoke Spanish. We only spoke Spanish at home, and then at school with my friends and my teachers or anybody else outside of my home, we only spoke English. So growing up, I didn't hear a lot of code mixing, but as I got older, I started hearing that more often, and so now I catch myself using it as well. So just because a child doesn't code mix doesn't mean that they're not going to code mix later on when they get older. Bilingualism versus monolingualism. As I mentioned, bilingualism is when a person knows two languages, and then monolinguals are people who only know one language. And several studies have shown that bilinguals show certain advantages when it comes to social understanding. That is due to the fact that bilinguals must navigate a complex social world where different people have different language knowledge. An example is if a bilingual preschooler seem to have somewhat better skills than monolinguals, is understanding other perspectives, thoughts, desires, and intentions. Bilinguals also show cognitive advantages. In particular, bilinguals appear to be to perform activities in inhibiting previously learned response. Bilingual adults have to regularly switch back and forth between their languages and inhibit one language while they selectively speak another by training the brain. So those are some of the benefits of bilinguals versus monolinguals. Now, to answer that question that was mentioned earlier, do children experience language difficulties or delays if they are bilingual? Their researchers found that bilingual children are not more likely than monolingual children to have difficulties with language, nor to show delays in learning. And they are also not more likely to be diagnosed with language disorders. Um, Although many parents do feel as if their child is being left behind, generally they have the same chance as monolinguals to, develop any language difficulties or delays. Um, Evidence does show that one bilingual child has a language difficulty or disorder does not indicate that all do or all will. Bilingual children with specific language impairments, such as Down syndrome and autism, are not more likely to experience additional delays or challenges compared to monolingual children who have a disorder as well. I do have an aunt who has an autistic um, child, and when he was younger, when he was younger, like a toddler, the doctor had mentioned to my aunt that to not speak to him in both English or Spanish because that could confuse him later on, especially when he would start school. But research shows that that is not true. You can speak to a child in both languages, whether they have a disorder or not, and that's not going to affect them. That's not going to bring more challenges to them. That's not going to confuse them or anything. So if you do have a child who has some kind of disorder or something like that, you can speak to them in two languages or even more than that, and they still won't be confused. Is earlier better? I know a lot of people ask, or a lot of people have heard that earlier is better. Learning languages at a young age is better compared to older adult. Researchers have found that that is not precisely true, that earlier is better. They have found that there is something called a critical period, which is the idea that humans are not capable of mastering a new language after reaching a certain age. Like I said, researchers disagree that there is even a critical period at all, nor when that and if there is a critical period, where or when that critical period actually does occur. An older child, for an older child and older adults, usually they do not have the same amount of time to devote to language learning compared to younger children. That's why a lot of people, like a lot of times, you believe that as a younger child, like as a toddler, you do learn a new language faster and better compared to an adult. But researchers found that that is because a lot of times older children and adults, they don't have the same time put into learning that new language compared to a toddler. And then for adults, like if you were to learn a new language at an older age, like an older child or adult, most of the time you don't have that one-on-one interaction with native speakers. So a lot of times that's what makes it harder for as you get older, to learn a new language. But it does not have to do with anything related to the brain, whether your brain retains information better when you're younger or older. Like that has nothing to do with if earlier is better. Now we're going to move on to the brain. The main advantage of being bilingual involves executive function. Executive function describes skills that allow you to control, direct, and manage your attention and your ability to plan. Um, a bilingual person has mastery of two languages, and the languages are activated automatically and subconsciously. The person is constantly managing the interference of the languages so that she or he doesn't say the wrong word in the wrong language at the wrong time. So the executive function is a big part of the brain, which I'll explain here in a little bit. I do want to share a little video that I found of how sometimes a bilingual person can mix up their languages.
You know how frustrating it is to have to translate everything in my head before I say it? To have people laugh in my face because I'm struggling to find the words? You should try talking in my shoes from 1 mile.
I think you meant...
I know what I meant to mean. Do you even know how smart I am in Spanish? Of course you don't.
So that's just a little clip. I thought it was funny. I think that's something that bilinguals are go through very often. Just mix up words all the time, and that doesn't mean that they don't know what they're saying or they don't know how to speak a certain language. It just comes out naturally. So, as I mentioned before, executive functions are the most complex brain functions. These are what separate us from apes and other animals. The executive function parts of the brain include the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for advanced processing. The bilateral supramarginal gyri, not sure if I said that right, plays a role in linking words and meanings. The anterior cingulate plays a role in emotions, impulse control, and decision making. These are just some of the parts of the executive function of the brain that are used in knowing more languages. And here is a picture of a study that I found. The study included monolingual and bilingual undergraduates, which measured gray matter volumes among these individuals. The red areas right here, as you can see, this is the bilingual brain, and then the monolingual brain. And as you can see, this one they know both English and Spanish, and this one only knows English. The red areas indicate where gray matter volumes were greater in one group versus the other. Students who spoke English and Spanish had greater gray matter volume compared to participants who spoke only English. And something interesting, something researchers want to further research is whether one particular language increases gray matter in the brain compared to another particular language. For example, here they use the Spanish languages, Spanish and English. So let's say you have students who know English and Mandarin. Would they have more gray matter in the brain than those who speak Spanish and English? Like, do languages determine how much gray matter your volume there is in their brain? I think that would be something interesting to further research. And to end off my presentation, I'm just going to leave this quote out there that says, bilingualism promotes the integrity of white matter as you age. It gives you more neurons to play with, and it strengthens or maintains the connections between them so that communication can happen in the most favorable way. So if you are wondering whether you want to learn a new language, whether you think it's too late to learn a new language, just don't think about it and just do it, because there's just so many benefits out there from knowing at least one other language than your native language.